I know it's just the preseason, but for some reason it just feels good because it could go either direction, right? Like, I'm happy I wasn't on the Charlotte Hornets end of it, and the way that this team played, and we got a chance to see the same starters that Coach Jenkins went with on Tuesday. And I know that Dillon Brooks is still out of the lineup. And so you have Desmond Bane and D'Anthony Melton kind of in there with whether it's competition or not. It's been really, really fun. And we talked yesterday to Keith about Jaren Jackson Jr. and Jaren played phenomenal. It was just like giving him some time, give him his moment. I asked Coach Jenkins after the game about Jaren and what he's seen from him. He said all he needed to do was get his legs under him. And that's what we saw. This team looks so good, especially in the first half where you have all of your starters with 11 points. The pace was there. They are meshing. They're knocking down threes. I'm going to take it. Preseason or not. Like, hey, have fun with it. Celebrate it.
Yeah, like you said, you could have been the Hornets on the other side of that.
Or the Bucks. You know what I mean?
Or the Bucks. Taking their chicken wings like 3 quarters were out. Goodbye. Yes. And unfortunately for the Hornets, they had to play all 4 quarters last night because, it was a 30-point game at halftime. It was a 30-point game at the end of the night. But some of the things that we continue to look out for, like Jaren Jackson Jr., I thought it was really promising to see him be more involved with the offense last night. That's what you wanted. You wanted him to be more active in the post. He was better from the 3-point line. And yet he didn't lose the things that we saw defensively from him in game 1. And he continued to be a really solid rebounder last night. The Grizzlies as a team were just demolishing the boards because the poor Hornets were without Mason Plumlee. They were without Gordon Hayward. They're both in health and safety protocols. And the Grizzlies were just able to absolutely mash when it came to taking advantage of their size. Steven Adams, 2 games as a Grizzly, 2 double-doubles. What drop-off? It's hard not to get caught up in it.
It's hard not to. And like, as you mentioned, the Hornets didn't have really any answer because they were out, a lot of their big-time players. But the way the Grizzlies were able to capitalize off of that, you're just impressed with sticking to the game plan working in your favor. Steven Adams was always down the post, getting everything from the offensive rebounds and putting it right back up. And then also, you look at just kind of like the fast break, and Coach Jenkins talked about that pace and what he's been working on in practice during training camp, and it showed with the defense. We knew that this Grizzlies team was a defensive-minded team. We saw that last season. But what you do after that, we're getting it back down, getting it back down, and then you saw the Grizzlies just do that from really all full 4 quarters. I think there was a moment in the fourth quarter where the Hornets, the Grizzlies weren't taking care of the ball. We went kind of down to our bench. We got a chance to see Jarrett Culver, Brandon Clark finally, getting some minutes in. And they didn't take care of the ball. Coach Jenkins, you could tell he was upset, called a timeout. They figured it all out, got it back together again, and the Grizzlies come out, on top. And to start the season off with 2 preseason wins is, in my opinion, phenomenal. Like, we have so many more preseason games to go, and we're still getting a chance to kind of see what these players look like. But as they, garner a lot more minutes, I know we said yesterday, will these guys get 20-something minutes? They did last night. Now we're moving forward. It's like, are we going to see this much of Ja and Jaren and Desmond Bane and D'Anthony Melton? I don't know, but if we are, I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah, it was funny because they played less minutes than they played against the Bucks, even though there were only 3 quarars basketball. But
are we still surprised at how I was surprised at how many minutes they still played? It was like, Ja playing 24 minutes. I was like, I wasn't expecting that.
I know, but then it was also a matter of them being so effective in that time. Like, even though they played a couple less minutes this time around, they were still just as effective, if not more effective than they were. They were able to build on what they did in that first game, and I think the big conversation has been, we know who Ja Morant is as a player. And yes, it's fun to see him come out in this complete attack mode in the preseason. But deep down, we all knew that's how Ja Morant was going to approach the preseason. We know that the biggest conversation going into this year is Jaren Jackson Jr. and his health and his ability to potentially take that next step forward in his game working with Ja Morant. I think preseason-wise, it has been fun, not surprising necessarily, but just this little competition, like you mentioned, between Desmond Bane and D'Anthony Melton, as both of them have been inserted in the starting lineup. Still no Dillon Brooks. But the freeness that they are playing with right now is a joy to watch. And the way that they are fitting into this Grizzlies offense, the way they're both shooting the ball so well, D'Anthony Melton doing what he always does, mixing it up on defense, coming back, having that shot there on the other side. But that presents an interesting little pickle for Taylor Jenkins, because the conversation was all about, okay, who's going to be that 5th starter? Is it going to be Desmond Bane? Is it going to be Kyle Anderson? And now D'Anthony Melton's lined up here, and it's like, Is it D'Anthony?
Yeah, you don't know. And Coach Jenkins was asked that after the game, talking about that competition. And he said, look, I knew it was going to be competitive. I knew it was going to be a battle, but I want it to be a hard decision, because if it's a hard decision, that means that they are both playing well. And Melton and Bane, they're both playing well. And I think Coach Jenkins is going to relish in that. As a Grizzlies fan, you have to be happy to see that. Like, you don't want, it's a friendly competition, because Desmond Bane and D'Anthony Melton have talked about it several times of how close they are. They both want to see each other succeed. And no matter if you're starting or coming off the bench, you still have a place, and they're still going to be equally important. But it is great to see Desmond Bane's shot being more consistent. I asked him about that, and he just said, honestly, it's just a matter of like free flowing and playing with these guys. He said playing with Ja and Jaren is so much fun, and I have to just be aggressive and get those, and just when I get that open look, just knock it down. And he said he has that like just that free flowing mentality. And even for D'Anthony Melton, it's really fun to see that shot be consistent, because for both of them, they both talked about them working on that during the offseason, is working on their shot and making sure that when they get that opportunity, it's gonna knock down, and it has been knocking down.
This goes back to the culture that the Grizzlies are trying to establish here, where, listen, we're going to bring in good players. You may not be the starter. You may not get the minutes that you think you deserve or that you are obligated to get, but you're still an important part of this team. You've got to buy in. We see time and time again in not just the NBA, but in all sports, where somebody gets benched and they shut down, they take themselves out of it, right? But when you have a leader like Ja and a structure that Taylor Jenkins is putting in, it is, okay, we're going to compete. We both want to start, but if you do, I'll be fine in my role. I'm comfortable in my role. I know that I can be successful. I trust this coaching staff to put me in places to be successful. So it's not going to end up in a situation where, Desmond's not starting and he just shuts down, he's pounding on the bench or something like that. And they're not built that way. Neither of those players are built that way. This is huge. This is a really good problem to have, because whoever is coming off the bench, they're starter quality, and they're putting pressure on the other team's second unit.
Yeah, there's just that level of exuberance. And it's easy to have fun and be happy when you're up 30 points in a preseason game, like, let's be honest. But even seeing the end of the bench in there last night, and you think about a guy like Jarrett Culver, someone who had a tough time, a lottery pick who had a rough year one, had an even rougher year two. Can being in this Grizzlies system like that help him unlock the next level offensively? He brings so much promise defensively, but you saw him make 2 threes last night, and it's the preseason, but you can't help but be like, oh, could he make more threes? Like, is this something that could carry over long term? You just don't know. But ultimately, I think the best thing in the preseason is when you have a lot of good things to talk about and not very many bad things at all to talk about. And that's exactly what you want in the preseason.
When do we play the Bulls?
I have no idea.
Oh.
I think they go to Chicago and Indiana next week. I'm not sure which way it goes.
Next Friday's the Bulls.
So then Wednesday's Indiana.
By that time, they probably won't play in their starters either.
Well, at some point, you want like one last go with your starters going into. It's so weird having 6 preseason games. Like, there's just a lot of preseason basketball to be played.
I guess it's, guess what Keith said. Like, I'm surprised that we scheduled so many preseason games. But now that you look at all the roster moves and the roster spots, in a way, it's probably best for Coach Jenkins to have so many games, because we have a lot of decisions to make. Like, that's going to be, but by this time next week, we're going to be asking Coach Jenkins, like, okay, so what's going to be the deciding factor? We haven't gotten a chance to see Chris Dunn yet. We want to know if Chris Dunn, what that looks like. I know he got a procedure done, but we want to know when he's going to be back out there, and if he's going to get some minutes up that we can see him, and who's not going to make the roster, who's going to make the roster. That's the next big question. And looking up and down this roster, like looking at the box score, it's like, wow, so that's a lot of names, a lot of good guys on there.
Yeah, and who makes the 10-man, honestly. And like you said, we saw Brandon Clark last night. There was a bit of a struggle there, and then you ended up seeing Xavier Tillman come in the fourth quarter, and he immediately gives you a couple threes, makes some big moves defensively, some big rebounds brought down. So you have little internal competitions that will create fun things to continue to look for throughout the rest of the preseason. But Taylor Jenkins has big decisions to make. Even Zaire Williams, ultimately, yes, he's a project pick and he's young, but has what he's shown us thus far give him a little bit of an edge in terms of earning some actual playing time during the season.
Last night was a little off of a night for Zaire, but just keep on. I was really impressed from what I saw in game 1 last night. But as it always, you always have to remind yourself, as one guy does, sometimes improves, that means like less time for someone else or less touches for another player. When someone has the hot hand, that's less touches for, XYZ. So don't forget that.
Absolutely. Okay, let's transition into the big story from yesterday that broke right after our show wrapped up. The news that 18 former NBA players were arrested and charged with allegedly attempting to defraud the NBA's health and welfare benefit plan. The players included were former Memphis Grizzly Tony Allen, along with former Memphis Tiger Christopher Douglas Roberts, CDR. Those charges face a count of conspiracy to commit healthcare and wire fraud, according to the indictment that was released yesterday. The scheme was carried out between 2017 and 2020. The false claims totaled around $4 million, and according to that indictment, former NBA player Terrence Williams was the leader of the operation. We will continue to see how this plays out. Court proceedings are expected to begin after October 25th in New York City, but this was certainly a story that obviously took over the NBA news space yesterday, but particularly here in Memphis, it was a huge deal.
Yeah, Tony Allen, Tony Roten, CDR, they are Memphis guys that we know who have played here. Tony Allen, he's a friend of GCM and a friend of the Grizzlies, and we know that he is the grind father. So a lot left to wait to figure out more information. Tony Allen's wife was also listed as one of them, and she was the only woman listed. And we know that the players involved had some of their relatives submitted approximately 3.9 million fraudulent claims. It's been reported that for Tony Allen's sake, some of that have been paid back. But this is going to be something that's probably going to be ongoing for the next, couple months as more information comes out. It was shocking news. You're saddened to hear it. You hope that, the right thing is going to be done and more information comes out for us all to kind of just really process what all of this is, because it was a lot. There were so many reports coming out like every single hour with like updated names. And as several of the reporters Tom Winter, who was one of the main reporters who reported it first for NBC, said this is going to be ongoing and so much is going to come out like daily. So we'd have to just kind of sit back and kind of wait. But we just hope that for the families, for everyone involved, that, they kind of figure everything out. And, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's serious.
Mm-hmm.
There's no getting around it. It's a big deal. And I know, from people jumping in to say, oh, it was only $4 million. And oh, it was the NBPA's health and welfare. When the feds get involved, the federal government is involved. It's a big deal. So we will continue to see how it plays out. We'll keep you updated in the meantime. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We've got a lot to get to and off the grind. There was Thursday night football last night. There's an amazing new NBA commercial that we've got to talk about, celebrating 75 years. We'll be back with more Rise and Grind after this.